This is our last iteration of Language Matters for this academic year. And as always, we try to put something on very special for our final one, and I think we succeeded in doing that. So my name is Tomás Jesus Garza, Tom Garza. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Slavic and Eurasian Studies and also the founding director of the Texas Language Center. We are 15 this year. So yeah, we've been around for a bit now. Yay, for us that's a big deal. That's a big deal. Thank you. So before we turn to the three speakers on our panel today, just a couple of quick announcements. So again, if you didn't get a copy of the last remaining events for this term, please do get a paper copy or just go to the TLC website. You can find an updated and up-to-date listing of all of our events. I did want to draw your attention to one event on April 14th. This is our colleague Charlie Nagel's talk on pronunciation teaching, key concepts and techniques, open to all languages. He'll be pulling examples primarily from Spanish, but also from ESL, English, and other languages. So please do come, and on our website, the TLC website, you can sign in. This is a brown bag event, but it's not a bring your own. We're actually providing bag lunches, thanks to our wonderful associate, Paula Bouches. So please sign in, and that way there'll be a lunch waiting for you for that talk in particular. So I don't want to waste any more time. I want to get right to our three speakers. Each will give a short, about 9-10 minute presentation, and then we'll open it up to have a conversation. The subject matter for this panel came about from a grad seminar we did together, the four of us, the three presenters and myself, last semester in a language teaching theory course on second language acquisition. And from that course, we pulled out so many examples of translanguaging, the use of a single, what seems to be a monolithic language body, but across socioeconomic, political divides and so forth that make for the most interesting kind of languages. So not just Russian, but Russians is, and Spanish, but Spanish is, French, and French is, and English is, of course, and so forth. And so we thought of bringing back the three members of our grad seminar for today's event. All three very generously agreed, and I'm so happy that they did, so we can all get to hear their talks. So without any further ado, let me introduce our first speaker today. Is Ali Yerenianik. He's currently a PhD student in comparative literature here at UT Austin. His research interests are, I love this list. I'm sure almost all of your topics, Ali, are on the current, do not say this publicly in Texas, but I'm going to. Necropolitics, geohumanities, cultural studies and critical theory, indigenous studies and critical university studies. Thank you for doing that important work. He's also previously presented his work at national and international conferences, including the Modern Language Association, the American Comp Lit Association, and others. Here in our program of comparative literature in 2023, he also was key in co-organizing the 18th annual GRACLS. This is a graduate student association of Comp Lit, to do their annual conference called After Comparatism. So I'm very pleased that he's joining us with a talk that's entitled, Even in My Dreams, I Won't Forget My Language. Even in my dreams, I won't forget my language. Even in my dreams, and you get the rest. So with that, no further ado, if I may introduce, please, Ali, join us up here.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Garza, for this opportunity, and it's lovely to see this many people here. And so my talk is actually going to be slightly different than what I had initially thought it would be about, but I'm essentially presenting a personal narrative that kind of looks at my own childhood and tries to kind of carve out a space to mix this narrative that I have with the narrative of Sechu Sende's Made in Galiza. I have a copy of the book if you would like to have a look at it. And yeah, it's mostly going to be a personal narrative. I won't be explicitly talking about the politics of the languages that I'll be looking at, but it will be, implied in my narrative, I'm assuming. And I'm happy to answer more questions on that front during the Q&A. So I don't really remember how old I was at the time, and with the sorts of narratives, right, We usually don't, right? We always say things like, you know, oh, when I was 9 or 10 years old, or when I was in my 20s, in my 30s, right? But, you know, ours was a house where the kitchen cabinets were made of wood and the stove was always lit with a lighter and you could, you know, actually see the fire coming from the stove. And, you know, there are still such houses today, but unfortunately their numbers are getting fewer and fewer. I remember the smell of sage boiling on the stove that day, and I also remember my parents talking to each other with words I didn't understand. Whenever I heard those words I didn't understand, my parents would be in a serious mood. Sometimes my older sisters would join them with these words as well. And I say words, right, because at that time I was definitely not old enough to, you know, realize that it was a different language. When I say serious mood, I mean that at times they would sound sad, at times angry, at times gloomy. Right now that I think about it, it was not really necessary for me to know what they meant or what these words were to understand the emotions behind them. And perhaps that's the only language that matters, right? The language of our emotions, and how do we, you know, communicate our emotions in what language. But, you know, this gloomy air, of course, was most annoying to a young child, who was me at the time. And with the effect of the sense of curiosity in this child, that pushes him to question. This questioning usually manifested itself in me interrupting their conversation and directing them expressions such as, oh, what are you talking about? Why don't you tell me? I don't understand you. They would always answer me in the language I understood and ignore what I said. After a while, I would get tired, despite, you know, the stubbornness that I had, and I would feel resentment towards my mother tongue, which I didn't even know had been taken away from me at the time. And this resentment would sometimes turn into fear. Because at that age, whenever I heard it, it meant that something was wrong, right? That things were not all right. So, you know, that day I was demoralized and went to the back room in our house, you know, what I call the back room. That's a very bad translation from Turkish. But it is, I guess, like what people would call like a children's room. But in our house, it was the coldest north-facing room. But it was the room where I stayed with my older sisters, where I felt warm with the peace of the heat emitted by the chestnuts on the wood stove. My middle sister was there that day, so I went and sat next to her. She had an old Blake tape player and a couple of cassettes. She would usually put on songs in my mother language, and one of those songs was playing. I was absorbed in looking at the bookshelf that she had, probably because of my mood. Suddenly, an interesting title caught my eye. On the cover of the book, the following was written: "Even in my dreams, I will not forget my language." I took the book up. I was at that age when I had just learned to read and I didn't understand, pretty much anything. And after a bit of shuffling, my sister took the book out of my hand and put it back in the bookshelf. That's the book that is now being circulated. It's translation, to put it better. And maybe I couldn't read the book, but that title has been in my mind ever since. Even in my dreams, I will not forget my language. The original book, as you're looking at it now, is in Galician with the title Made in Galicia, and contains many anonymous stories. Some of them fictional, others real-life stories, but all of them true to life. The title of the translation is actually one of the stories title in the book, and that's the story of a 5-year-old boy. He's traveling to town with his mother on the bus one day and is listening to a conversation between two women about Galicia. One of them worriedly tells the other that the biggest problem of this generation is that children are losing their language, while the other confirms this with a worried look. The child asks his mother, "Mom, is it true that children are losing their language?" The mother is surprised and worried at the same time, yet says, "Yes, it is true. many children, especially those living in cities, are losing their language. On the bus back home, the boy hears a man on the radio talking about the loss of language as a nationwide disease. And he is obviously affected by these occurrences and promises himself that from that moment on, he will speak his language everywhere, at every opportunity. Even in his dreams, he promises himself that he won't forget his language. In my case, it's childhood again, but we've grown up a bit, maybe a few years. We play all kinds of games in the neighborhood. When I look back, I feel a great happiness that I had a childhood spent playing with rocks and dirt and all that. I remember we used an egg box set aside to be thrown away as a treasure map, and an abundant gasoline tanker we climbed on top of as a pirate ship. What an imagination we had. It was one of those days when I was playing outside again with my best friend Hassan, who has been with me as long as I can remember, and he's still my best friend. I would even say, since I could first walk, I remember him. At that age, of course, as soon as we woke up in the summer mornings, we would rush outside and play until our mother scolded us from the balcony at midnight. That day, too, my mother shouted from the balcony, "Come home, Gule, come home." That's what she always called us, Gule. In Turkish, it was a cognate in Turkish, gül, which means flower or rose. And for some reason, this word didn't give me a headache like the others did, probably because I knew what it meant. Hassan was also used to my mother calling us that way, but that day, for some reason, he got very angry and shouted back at her, "Don't ever call me that word again." I couldn't understand his reaction. I mean, after all, right, every child is some sort of a flower in his mother's eyes. Of course, at that time, we didn't have the consciousness to realize that we had very different origins, language, and politics. For that, we had to lose our imagination and become grown-up men. I went to high school in a place with a radically right-wing ideological context. Of course, many things didn't make sense during those years of political indoctrination. There was also puberty involved. I don't remember much now, but there was a girl that I liked. And high school romances are always a common theme in literature, in many forms of storytelling. But each one is indeed special, whether we remember it clearly or not. We were still innocent, maybe that's why. I think we loved each other. That's why we used to meet every break and have lunch together every afternoon. It was a good time, until some bullies came and threatened both her and me with a knife in their hands. The reason was politics, our different ethnic backgrounds, our different linguistic backgrounds, etc. As I said at the beginning of the conversation, I don't want to go into too much detail about the political side of things. As you can appreciate, these topics are better discussed in other contexts, but I'm happy to answer any questions that may arise. But anyway, we didn't meet again afterwards. But I still remember both mine and her tears from our last conversation. That day, of course, everything was over and I was wandering around the corridors with a rebellious attitude, whistling. It turned out that I was imitating the melody of one of the songs that my sister played on her black tape without realizing it. What made me realize this was the vice principal coming up behind me and slapping me on the back of the head. All these situations and similar ones, of course, increased the anger and fear in me. But I no longer felt these feelings towards my own tongue. It was as if these feelings had found their right place through these experiences. Their source was no longer my mother tongue, which I never understood, which even today I only half understand, but rather the hatred that people had for it. Hatred is a very heavy thing, the kind of thing one is crushed under. I've always found it strange how we sometimes normalize it in the languages that we use, right? In English you say, I hate this, I hate that. In Spanish it's not too different, odio tal cosa, odio otra cosa. We use it all the time. To feel anger and fear against hatred Maybe that was what took me from Mesopotamia to Galicia. I shuffled through the book again, and this time I came across a visitor from Galicia who arrived in Mesopotamia. An old man named Matur was guiding this visitor on a trip to the Kurdish villages in the region. And he was talking about the years of ongoing political oppression, the massacre of millions of families, and the displacement of the remaining ones. Our visitor tells us, as Matur informs him, the banning of the language means that people in these villages can't speak, can't write. They don't have words. A deathly silence, people forgetting their names and last names, women singing or trying to sing without words, gestures, hand gestures, sometimes smoke, the color of their shoes, all these and more are now used to communicate in these villages. And our visitor photographs all these. Before this trip ends, a woman named Seda Branca, a fictional character, asks him why he chose to lose his own language. Our Galician guest can only answer with tears. Finally, he asks Seda in turn, why don't you try to bring the words back? Seda answers, because they stole them from us, and one day they will return them and apologize. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Ali. Thank you. And we'll move to our second presenter today. Very pleased to introduce to Paulina Washington. Well, you can clap. I'll say a few words about her. Paulina Washington is a proud, non-traditional student, a mother, an active duty Army finance captain with over 8 years of service. Thank you for your service, Paulina. And pursuing a master's degree in Russian, East European, and Eurasian studies. You can clap for that too. There you go. A professional student, as observed by her husband. She holds a double BA from UC San Diego in psychology and in Russian and Soviet studies, as well as a JD from the University of Richmond School of Law. Not bad. Paulina's academic interests include Russian language acquisition in children, second language acquisition and language pedagogy, as well as the study of languages, at the moment Ukrainian and French. Her talk today is on preserving Russian, how a heritage speaker prioritizes Russian as a parent in English American.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. So, hi, I'm the heritage speaker. But first, I want to take you back to 2016, when I walk into my new job and meet my new coworker. Hi, I'm Paulina Washington, I say. I don't get a hi back. I get a Washington. That's not Russian. They told us we were getting a Russian. Where's your accent? Yes, that was me, a Russian speaker without an accent. Something that people love to highlight. Where is my accent and why don't I have one? I must not actually be Russian and I must not actually know the language. It's like I have to work hard to prove who I am and what I identify as. So, the backdrop to my language story is greatly demonstrated by this quote. If bilinguals' knowledge of the home language is both recognized and respected, that can validate the language spoken by the next generation in the diaspora, encouraging those speakers to maintain and relearn it and pass it on to the next generation. So now we'll go through my journey as to why I see the value of Russian in my own multilingual household and how it stems from the way that I grew up in Russian-speaking Los Angeles. My story with some great, beautiful images. So growing up in Los Angeles in the 1990s, you could definitely say I was fortunate enough to be in a community where Russian was absolutely recognized and respected. I had a Russian-speaking doctor, a Russian-speaking dentist. I went to Russian grocery stores, as we all called them back then. We had an ability to live in this apartment complex in Hollywood that was predominantly filled with, as we called them, babushkas, old Russian ladies that seemed to be grandmas because we're kids. We don't know how old they actually are, and they had their thick, heavy Slavic accent. That was our community. It was a special Russian bubble in the city. So not only was I living in a community where I had the chance that my language had some sort of respect, I also had parents who absolutely encouraged that Russian be spoken in the home. That was our family language policy. My parents didn't care what we did between my brother and I, if we spoke English. She didn't care, she, my mom, but my dad as well. They didn't care if we spoke, English was for outside the house, other activities. We had Russian television, music, and newspapers. But don't ask me how we got all those. I don't know. We just had them. We had Cyrillic all over the house. You name the Russian author, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Chekhov, whoever, we had them. Cyrillic, again, it was just everywhere. Now, how much my brother and I actually spoke Russian to each other, we don't have the data to prove that, but what I can tell you is that even today, we speak it a lot better than our peers whose families came to the US during similar time frames. So we do say that at least, we thank our mom because she did a great job of ensuring that language stayed with us. But then in middle school, in the early 2000s, I started noticing a divide. What I considered simple Russian phrases, let's say something that you would learn after an introductory Russian course, spending a year studying it, simple communication, my peers could not understand. They started saying, "We speak English at home. I don't know what you told me." They started giving themselves nicknames to accommodate English speakers. They started shortening their last names instead of holding on to their Russian identity more tightly. It actually took me a while to pronounce Tsvetikova as Tsvetikova, although realistically that didn't make things easier for English speakers. But it was my way of rebelling, saying, no, this is my last name, this is how you pronounce it. At this time, I also started being recognized for my Russian. It was good enough to maintain conversations with those who had more Russian language exposure. In this case, the same babushkas that I referenced, those grandmas, those older generations who spent a lot more time in Russian-speaking communities, they gave me the kudos, they gave me the credit, like, oh, okay, we can actually have a conversation with you, maybe there's an English word or two, but for the most part, you're speaking our language, you're on our level, right? Even though I never wanted to share my English writing or speak publicly unless I was called on. I would never volunteer to do what I'm doing today. Nevertheless, I didn't have this confidence in English, but no one considered me as an ESL learner. They thought, you know what, you're good enough in Russian and you're good enough in English. But for me, I said, I associate as a Russian. I'm a Russian speaker. That is first and foremost who I am, but that's not what everyone saw me as. Now today, this is my family now, and it's fair to say that I live life linguistically. I'm attached to both the Russian language and the English language. And my heritage language, it's definitely hard to switch on. It's kind of funny how people think that it's literally a light switch, so you just turn it on and you can automatically speak this language, forgetting that I live in an English-dominated society. My career is in English. My education is in English. My errands are in English. The chance of me using Russian is not as high. But again, hey, heritage speaker, you should be able to pop that switch and go for it, all in your native tongue. So thankfully, I have a spouse who has seen firsthand the value that Russian has provided me. I've had educational opportunities thanks to being a Russian speaker. I've had career opportunities in the past and in the future because I am a Russian speaker. And I also maintain a cultural tie to my Russian-American identity, which I can't say the same for a lot of the peers that grew up with me in the 90s. I've learned that having that upbringing with Russian has shown me that I too can continue with my language and that I can pass it down. The language doesn't have to die with me. So our 3 kids, 7, 4, and 2, have had their Russian-speaking grandparents in their lives for various points of time. Baba and Deda, that's how they know them, Grandpa and Grandpa. They know and they understand that Russian is that primary gate to communicate with them. Even our dogs are bilingual. Whether they realize it or whether they want it to be, Many times I can catch my dad on the porch with his cigarette having a full-on conversation with our dog, who, oh, by the way, does have a Russian name. His name is Lyova, okay? But now, with the ongoing Russian invasion, my oldest starts asking me, remember, she's only 7, Mama, when can we visit Russia? When can we go to Russia? Well, Lyudmila, we can't. There's a war going on. Oh, it must be pretty bad. Yes, my 7-year-old, it is pretty bad. So what can we do? All we can do is seek other avenues of familiarization with this language that ties us to this country, to this culture, to this identity. So what do? We use Russian in the home when they're out with me, as much as I can before I let English creep in. My 2-year-old, he'll hear a Russian phrase, he executes. My 4-year-old, for whatever reason, she thinks she is the family translator. She will tell her big sister, Lyudmila, Mama said this, and translate Russian, and she gets it right. And my oldest, she just goes ahead and answers me in English. But they're hearing it, they're experiencing, and they're sharing it. We do have Duolingo to get that early exposure. Not the best way, but a way. And what's to say there's only one way to get that language to your kids? Thankfully, we can watch some Russian cartoons, maybe on YouTube or Kartina TV. And honestly, can you imagine where language growth would be if we didn't have the internet? Especially in situations where you can't just easily pack up your family to a physical location that is tied to that language, right? Absolutely, there still are countries that speak Russian, but what is the likelihood and the ability that I can take my family of 5 and go there without being introduced to other situations? Maybe we don't want to hear Russian. Oh, you speak Russian. Oh, you're American, and there go other identities that go along with that experience. So the takeaway from my lived experience is exemplified greatly by this quote. So heritage speakers, again, that's me. We will never be the same as monolingual speakers of a given language, but we can still do our part to contribute, in this case, to the canvas of Russian without borders. I think the hardest part for me to realize was that the language I speak, the Russian I speak, it doesn't have to be perfect. It will not be perfect. It will never reach the Russian gold standard of a perfect language. And you just have to accept that the language you do have, you do hold on to, it is good enough for you and for your purposes that you're using it with, right? So I have throughout the years developed a desire to, I don't want to say relearn it, because can you really ever relearn something you never formally learned? But I have sought out the exposure. How can I make myself better to things that make me, that people love to say, oh, well, that comes naturally to you. You're a heritage speaker. You grew up with it. We still struggle because maybe I don't pronounce the ending of my words because I'm not sure what the proper ending is and what case it actually should be, but I still can formulate the word and get the thought across to whoever I'm speaking with. I never went around thinking I was an expert in my language. Even to this day, I don't think that, and I probably never will. But again, I do appreciate the credit that has given to me, the applause I get for the language that I do know and that I do possess. And I do have my parents to thank for that. You know, I make the joke that, oh, my mom, she was stubborn to make us speak Russian in the house. But at the same time, she was determined that the language wasn't going to die with her just because she required a change of circumstance to, again, bring us somewhere and provide us the opportunity that she wanted to have that we otherwise may not have elsewhere. So seeing how that was important in my house, when I was growing up, I took that same approach to make it important in the house and the family that I have today. So thank you all very much. Spasiba. I'm over here struggling to.
You're good. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Paulina. And so our third speaker today, our final speakers, hopefully pulled this together for us. Ana Carrasco is a 4th-year PhD candidate in bilingual bicultural education program in curriculum and instruction here at our College of Education at the University of Texas. Her professional experience is firmly rooted in her dedication to bilingual and bicultural education and driven by her passion for uplifting and supporting the Latinx community. Her talk today, the title is Embracing the Power and Diversity of Spanishes, Multilingual Settings, Translanguaging, and Bilingualism.
Agenda, basically, how I'm gonna play something, show you the context of what is it that I'm doing, what is translanguaging, what are the characteristics of translanguaging, how does translanguaging looks and sounds around us, not only in a classroom, but around in our lives. And then I'm gonna bring it to my passion, which is education, and then final thoughts and reflections. So my question for you right now is, how do you call this? In your own language. Someone else? But no, that's a good question. No. In Mexico and where are you from? El Salvador, you call them palomitas, but if you go to Colombia, they call them crispetas. And if you go to Argentina, they call them pocholos. And Venezuela, catufas. So we are talking about the same people speaking the same language and signing popcorn in different ways. So just have that thinking when you're thinking about students in a classroom or people around you when you're having a conversation. What about this one? Again? Other languages, it's okay. Let's combine, we're all bringing. Well, I'm just gonna bring it to my Spanishes because that's the one that I bring, but as we know, we will call it over here all orange juice. But if you don't have that repertoire, we will call it in our own language. And if we go through Mexico, okay, jugo de naranja. En España lo llaman zumo. And if you're having, again, a conversation, it won't be exactly the same. Your attention will be exactly there. So let me bring you a little bit to my life. This is me. Born and raised in Mexico City, learned English as an adult. They said that I was learning English when I was young, but having English once per week because I was in a religious class. We go in a school where religion was first, and I was having religion class every single day and English once per week is not learning when I was young. So I came to do my master's here, and that's when I realized that, oh my gosh, my English is nothing. And of course, my accent, super strong. And I've been trying to erase it, but then I decided to embrace it. I said, like, I'm not gonna erase who I am. I learned when I was adult. And now I have 3 kids, raised and born here in Austin. And sometimes they're like, Mom, you don't say it like that. I said, like, chicos, remember, I'm trying to teach you Spanish as well. So let's embrace who we are and how do we speak. I have had the opportunity to live in different places, but really, really my heart is still in Mexico and with my family. My whole family lives over there, and it's just us living here in the United States. As well as my colleagues, my home was mini Mexico, so when my kids were when they are at home, they have to only speak Spanish. That's the rule unless we have a guest or someone else that they don't speak the same language. So then we will try to speak, we will speak English, but if not, they will have to speak and practice Spanish at home. So a little bit of a context about translanguaging. I decided to add a map. This is very brief, but I'm gonna show you later in another slide that even if you have a Mexican Spanish, there's no one single Mexican Spanish. We have a lot of different Spanish in Mexico. So translanguaging is not something new that we just brought. 2005, Hugenberg called this the continuum of biliteracy, when he was saying that we have to allow other people to speak in one or more, or 2 or more languages. That there's not universal Spanish. Are you in water? Are you okay? That there's no universal Spanish in one strict sense, and that the accents in the world and expressions are that reflect our cultural, who we are, our diversity. And talking about Spanish, we have more than 20 countries that speak the same language, but at the same time, we don't speak the same language. So translanguaging. We can go back even more to the past, to 1984 and 1987. And they used to call it cannot even say it, lenguajear, which means emphasizing how human interactions uniquely involves observing, reflecting, and describing practices. Let's keep moving. So there are several prominent researchers here in the United States that have contributed to the field of translanguaging, or the concept as the translanguaging as we know them right now. These are Ofelia Garcia, of course, Ricardo Odegui, and Ricardo Wallis, and as well Li Wei. The four of them, they have been working on translanguaging and the concept of translanguaging. For Ofelia Garcia, one definition, and I need to go a little bit of academia, but it's the act performed by bilinguals of accessing different linguistic features of or various modes of what are described as autonomous languages in order to maximize communicative potential. Then the three of them together came up with another definition, which is the deployment of a speaker's full linguistic repertoire without regarding for the watchful adherence to the social and political defined boundaries of named languages. Basically, what they're saying is, we need to use our full repertoire when we're talking. Like, we don't know every simple word when we're talking with someone else. When we provide this to a student, to the person in front of you, we're returning the power to the speaker, because we are not stopping ourselves to say, oh, how do I say that word? You just say it and continue the conversation. And perhaps the other person will catch, or we will fulfill what is it language, which is communication in general, provide that message that you would like to convey. It's what they were saying, these three scholars, they were saying, like, it's opening a space to people to be people again, to humanize the concept of communication. So bilinguals, multilinguals have one language system, which is a linguistic feature associated with one language or the other. But they also learn to suppress certain features depending on the situation. What that means is we translanguage every single day, and we don't pay attention to them. So how does translanguage looks around us? I'm going to show you, well, you won't know who they are, but some communications among my mom, amigos, and partners. And the first one is, what was that here? I was going to wait for you because I don't feel like he will let me do it alone. Remember last time, no le gustó, so he didn't like it. So he just added at the end. This other one, Jeka, that's the name of a person, is asking if you fabric for the manteles. Manteles, they're talking about tablecloths. I say, ¿qué manteles? What tablecloths? What fabric? Do I fabric? If you want the tela, the Kia manteles. And we're getting that conversation. Hola, hi, what did Ben said? I'm going to read in Spanish and then in English. Perdón, lo acabo de escribir, el drop-off será para mañana. Sorry, I just sent him a message, and the drop-off will be tomorrow. Over here, don't accept it until we know. That's what we're supposed to do. Portia, this is on Peruvian words that even didn't get it. Of course, mijita, don't worry, you are finishing school, even if I needed to sell my soul. Okay, I'll go this week and find it out. Okay, bebita, just let me know if I need to do something from my end. Qué lío. It's complicated. It's okay, pero me está molestando. The okay, it's something that we acquire from English. Over here, hasta mañana, mijita, see you tomorrow. Mijita linda, that's super sweet. Que tengas una linda semana, I love you. This is in Portuguese, and I will not even try to do it. But this is my sister's and her husband's family chat. But they use Portuñol, Español, and Portuguese while they're chatting. And this last one. Do I pick up my dirty clothes? Yes, mi amor, please. So over here, I'm going to show, I was telling you a little bit about how Spanish, even in Mexico, is totally different. I'm going to show you different regions. I'm sorry, I don't have a translation for this one, but It will tell you about how do we use language. Up north, we use more Spanish combined with English. In central Mexico and south, we use Spanish combined with indigenous languages. We acquire a little bit from all of them.
Sabes que eres mexicano cuando sabes exactamente cuánto tiempo duró un ahorita lo hago.
Hola, Di. Mi pienso es que te pueden gustar las chapatas, corundas y ochepos de Michoacán, pues...
Los del norte con influencia de España septentrional.
Pues la neta sí me gustaba, pero tengo un primo que se rifa acá yo con las ocas, entonces no hay falla.
Y los de influencia maya en la península de Yucatán.
Pues, onda, hija, ¿cómo estás? Vas a tu...
Where did you stop? Well, the Maya, the Perepetua, and that was with indigenous languages. So how do we combine those? I understood half of those conversations. Like I wasn't, like when I was seated, I was like, But that's how we translanguage as well in our own countries, not only in Mexico, that happens everywhere. So we translanguage as well when we're giving advice, consejos. We call in Spanish consejos. When we get grandma, grandpa, our parents consejos. So do I have it in English? Yes. No. It's two different consejos. Cuando era pequeña, mi abuelita always told me, nunca olvides de dónde vienes. It wasn't until I grew up that I understood what she truly meant. Cada año, we gather as a family to celebrate el Día de los Muertos. It is a day filled with vivid colors, sweet pan de muerto y recuerdos de nuestros seres queridos. I remember my abuela saying, las tradiciones nos conectan con quienes somos. It stayed with me ever since. So if you speak Spanish, you will see that this is a huge, well, even if you don't, you understand that half of that is not English, it's Spanish combined. And in our narrativas as well, when we're telling stories as well, I was like, this is what happened to my son. And you have it, I did a translation on the bottom for this one. El día que mi hijo intentó ser local en español, fue interesante. Estaba en México buscando algo para comer y le dijo al taquero. Taquero is when you go and get tacos in Mexico. ¿Me da 4 tacos, porfa? Él respondió, con todo, salsa, cebolla, cilantro. Y él muy confiado le dijo, sí, claro, que no me voy a rajar. Rajar es, well, you have it on the bottom. Lo miró y rió, diciendo, eres muy valiente, güero. Güero is a way to say it to the blonde people in the United States. He was red. My son was completely red with all the ingredients that he was eating over there. But he was trying to be part of that community. He said that he speaks Spanish. They do, but are you really immersed in that culture? So bringing all this was in general, but bringing translanguaging in education, to the classroom. We have the prefix trans. Oh, time. I'm sorry, you guys. I don't see it. Oh, yeah, I have to finish. To go beyond as in transcend. So translanguaging is language boundaries. So what we're doing is we're using, again, just one unitary linguistic competence, which is using all the repertoire that we have. I'm not going to show you Andy Brown's video, but if you have a chance, do it, because he brings, like, even though Spanish is not his main language, he has students from Korea, Japan, Mexico, indigenous cultures, and he's trying to incorporate all those students' language repertoires into his class. So he keeps asking students, how do you say this in your language? How do you say it? So everybody's sharing their own culture in the classroom, and I'm gonna skip it. So what should we care about using translanguaging in our classrooms? It's opportunities for our students, provide for bilinguals to develop linguistic practices and in academic context. Make a space for bilingualism and ways of knowing, and supports bilingual as they engage more in complex contexts, supports bilingual socio-emotional development and their bilingual identities. So I won't read this, but again, in bringing back, including in our classrooms, our home languages, encourage students and provides a sense of belonging to a space, belonging to a place where you feel welcome. Providing translanguaging languages and learning assets is making learning more meaningful for the students, and again, letting them communicate in any way you can. And to finalize, it's mirrors and windows. I can see myself, I can see my colleagues, I can see other people, but as well, not only I can see the Mexican in front of me, but I can see the Latin American, the Russian, like, I cannot say it, this is a presentation, but being in that class, it was amazing for me with a different, I normally use with people that speak Spanish, but coming to this program, it was like the cherry on top for my program, and that's saying this, like, we can see that window. That's what I wanted to land. The window is not only our mirrors, but the window when we see others and accept others as a human being. Thank you.
Thank you all so much, all three of you. Thank you, Ali, as well, Paulina and Anna. We have a little bit of time here. Questions, comments, please. And you may direct your question or comment to either an individual or just to the panel at large. Please, let's get started.
Okay.
Yeah. Is it just a question for anybody? Or?
It's for all the presenters. All presenters. Okay, so I really enjoyed your presentations. I really enjoyed the sort of scope, the investment in terms of being a polyglot. For a class, I've had to read some George Steiner, and he presents the question of, like, how can we understand language, the multiplicity of languages, as like a Darwinian benefit when it doesn't seem to be a benefit for like humans to have like all these different little languages in reality. I think that there is a benefit to having a whole bunch of different languages, and the benefit is that you don't always want other people to know what you're talking about. And I tie this sort of to James C. Scott and his own ideas of like the legibility of people and governments and the like. So in terms of like the classroom, or in terms of like pedagogical praxis, I'm interested not only in the fact that when you're teaching a language, you're teaching a way of people being more legible to a larger amount of people. What about the idea of learning about being illegible, or learning about the importance of whether or not it is important to be illegible, or what kind of political backlash can come from that? So, I don't know, just in general.
Thank you. What's this start off?
Sure. So that is a difficult question, but I think it starts in the classroom. I think it starts by just trying to take politics out of it, by trying to make language learning more individual and understanding kind of the why you have certain students in your class. Like, for example, when people take Russian, I'm always curious, what is your connection? Do you have family? Is it just you've always heard it in the movies and you're just curious, what is that link? So I think instead of focusing on, okay, well, Russian is the language of the aggressor, you can kind of shape it into different conversations within that classroom, such as, okay, let's think about maybe the why that you care about it, the why it matters to you, and then assist in educating people with that language. And maybe you'll hopefully keep them going in your language, or maybe they'll say, that was enough for me, that was great exposure, I met the requirement for my language and I'm going to keep it moving.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add to that, but so personally, I've only language-wise, I've taught, Turkish and English in other contexts, but in academic contexts, I've only taught Spanish. And all I can say about it is, like, I think there are two perspectives in terms of legibility. The one is when you're teaching it, what is your own relationship as the instructor to the language? I think that has a huge effect on how you articulate, like, the politics, the political context of legibility and illegibility. Because in my experience, I learned English because I had to learn English to communicate with the rest of the world, whereas with Spanish, it wasn't the same, right? It was something that I wanted to learn, and it's, surely the same with the learners, with the other learners, with the students, and also the students' attitude. Like, I mean, one thing that I can think of that's happened like last semester, if I remember, you know, like teaching the question of inclusivity in relation to Spanish, the gender pronouns, for instance, and the fact that the language is gendered. You know, like there were, we as instructors at the time, as a group of instructors, had to find ways of kind of communicating, okay, to what extent do I tell the students that, you know, you're free to do that, right? Like here is an alternative way of articulating certain things in this language that people has come up with, and you're free to use it in my classroom. Now that is one thing. Then there are certain legislative questions, as you know, people are aware. So the wording that you articulate as you are making certain things legible and the others illegible, because you know you have some sort of backlash from some students, whereas the others would, you know, like kind of be against you if you didn't present that alternative. So it's a difficult balance, I believe. I just wanted to kind of like bring that up. Maybe that's like useful context to think more about this question.
And in my case, it will be more going through the humanizing aspect. It's we have been here for a while. As the Spanish is the second language more used in the United States, but as well, it's more like the culture. Again, what they say, it's how are you connected to that language? And I try not to see institutions. I try to see the person in front of you and how do they embrace that language and see the world we're living right now. That's why I'm trying to share with my students is we're living in a national world with, we have phones, we have computers, we have more people than the ones that were here. So just to see a little bit more abroad, that's what I would do.
Well, thank you very much. So just a brief remark, you know, to your question, because first of all, thank you very much for your wonderful presentations. And I think that preserving the varieties of language is actually preserving the wealth of cultures and the richness of the world. Otherwise, we're going to be monochrome. To your question, and the reason why I was listening to Paulina's excellent presentation, who's my TA in a class which is called Political Warfare. And it's a non-Western political warfare, so in fact, it speaks right to me. And we're blessed with a large number of undergraduate students. And it's a huge challenge, you know, not to fall into the trap of what certain groups would expect us. You know, in our case, you know, it will be Russophilia versus Russophobia. In fact, the way we're presenting, you know, through linguistic lens as well, very controversial matters, very hotly disputed because they're highly political, they're in the daily news, in the daily conversations, and so on. I think not only language instructors, but subject matter instructors as well that deal with Latin American politics, Mexican politics, and so on. I can speak about the government side and security side, but what our challenge is actually to show, and I think Paulina was alluding to this in her household and her traditions, the idea to demonstrate a mode of thinking. There is a mode of thinking, you know, not us trying to trample it with a template, but actually recognize the sort of minor differences and then critically assess, you know, what those institutions or politicization and so on means. This is one. Number two is that, at least for outside of language learning, but connected to language learning as well, and I think Professor Garza has been pioneer in this respect. Thank you for all these years, you know, of teaching here. In order to understand sometimes what we call in Latin differentia specifica, you know, you need to speak the original language and then compare whether what has been translated to you, you know, in English, in German, in any other language, actually conveys the full meaning of what it is. So ideally, of course, our students would be reading, in my case, security, philosophical, tactical, military, and so on, intelligence work, which is produced by non-English speaking authors, which actually have something to contribute. And I think that all of those efforts are very, very important, especially in times of high polarization and where we're moving towards binary choices, either or, 1 or 0. The world is not 1 or 0. It's very much shades, in between. So thank you very much for asking this. It's not easy, and yet, if an educator is able to present, that's why I enjoyed so much your texts, which run exactly in my family in 3 languages, and everybody seems to pick up, immediately what it is. And no, we have to preserve this. Why walking away from treasures, that make the world a better place? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentations. I have a question for Anna Carrasco. Hi. So
Hi.
I am about to dip my toe into this translanguaging field.
Yes.
And I am currently writing up my prospectus, and I am very interested in your pedagogical approach because that's where I'd like to situate my research. I want to take it back home to Cape Town, to South Africa, and I resonate very strongly with this whole idea of translanguaging. I do, however, find myself in a bit of a quandary because I am reading the literature and I'm torn because I want to ask how you respond to criticisms about this idea of translanguaging being very vague, wanting to take on too much, this idea of one unitary model of language, and this idea of, and how do you come back against established research, bilingualism, research about people who speak multiple languages being able to inhibit or being able to choose how to process language, access and process language. So, I, as much as I endorse it, and I do believe strongly because I saw it growing up, I experienced it, being in a very multilingual environment, the struggles that learners have when they come to an academic space and English is the mode of instruction, and that's not the situation that they have. It's not coming from a place of deficiency. So preaching to the choir here. But the point is, I find myself in an academic space where I'm having to defend what is almost like a southern, almost like a global south perspective, and now you bring it to the global north, and the global north is going to say, no, this is, you've got to frame this in our language, which is essentially what we're trying to break down, right? Yeah, but here I am, here I am in this particular space. So, yeah, I don't know, it's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
But I feel like
it is. But I'm going to speak. I'm just going to say and recognize. I'm not an expert in translanguaging. I'm a student. I'm learning as we go. I can speak on my personal experience as a teacher inside of a classroom. We were using what they call Gomez and Gomez, and you were teaching 3 days English, 2 days Spanish, and you have to switch your brain into the other language. Then I came into academia and I started listening about translanguaging, and I said, why we were limiting our students to switch their brains to something else when they already have all that information inside, and we were limiting their vocabulary, their way to express inside of a classroom because they had to choose one of the others. And I did, perhaps I did this mistake with my kids when they were young, but then I was watching videos, and I can show you a lot of those. They were mixing both languages all the time because that's what was coming into their brains. That was the first thing that was coming. So why do we have to limit, even a child or an adult? We all have that repertoire in our brains. So I think we just embrace it. It's, as I'm saying, it's a big work. Yes, of course.
I'm going to add just one small bit because of the way you framed your question to the group here is one we did actually talk about in our theory class a bit. It's not pushing back even, it's simply, I guess, a corollary to the way you framed the question of why if you're using all these languages only so that you come here and the mode of instruction is English. And my pushback is, I've been here 35 years, and for the first 26, I would have agreed 100% with that statement, that the mode of instruction is English. And for the last years, it's not. The mode of instruction is Englishes. I'm looking at 3 faculty members here, all of us in Slavic, the Slavic department, and the 3 of us would have as our mode of instruction 3 very different Englishes. But we're teaching the same group of students, some of them here, and they all need to understand what we're saying to them. And so indeed what we're doing, what our students have learned to do, whether they were willing to or unwilling to, but simply almost reflexively, is they've learned to translanguage in the environment of what we do, and that's just the educational environment. It's not talking about the world at large. Yeah.
I suppose that's what I'm trying to get at is like, how do we come back from the criticism that this is not something new in the classroom? Because this is what people do.
Just make it the workplace. I was going to just say we can then broaden it out, because I think that's it, is that I started looking at the word micro from what we do here at UT, and then immediately realized, but we're training people to be in government service, in the military, and realizing that the same thing is happening. In the military, they'll have 3 different commanding officers, and none of them will speak the same English. They will all speak a different version of English or a different kind of English. I know our time is, I know this was just such, I knew this conversation would probably take us till 6 in the afternoon. Yeah, please, yes. Okay, thank you, Paula. Thank you.
I just wanted to thank the 3 speakers. I can relate to each one of you personally. I'm a professor in the French department. I'm a native Spanish speaker, so trilingual, and I'm teaching a new course in the fall, French for Spanish speakers. So that's going to be interesting. The beauty of having grown up in a Hispanic country in Latin America is that you watch a lot of telenovelas from different countries. So I can recognize a Venezuelan accent. I can recognize, obviously, a Mexican accent, best telenovelas ever. So I'm looking forward to the window that you are speaking about, because it's going to be a window for me as an instructor. So to be able to code switch and understand, and I can't even remember what you said popcorn was in Colombia, but yeah. And that's another point, is we all said popcorn, right? I mean, it is inevitable that in El Salvador we're saying popcorn. It's not going to be palomitas de maíz. So it's challenging to keep that alive. Yeah. Thank you.
So thank you all. Thank you for your videos. Thank you all for another great year. The TLC is so grateful for this kind of support. Please keep spreading the word. We always like to have a good, robust discussion in a good group here. We're going to pick up our new topic, by the way, for Language Matters beginning in September, is going to be using artificial intelligence in the teaching of languages and cultures. We had to do it. We had to do it. So thank you all so much, and we'll see everybody. Have a great summer.